Hello, Realogy. Thanks for joining us for this very special and very exciting town hall. We've got some great special guests here with us today to kick off Realogy celebration of Hispanic Heritage Month. First off, I want to recognize and thank Lexi Lopez, who has pulled this entire event together. She will be our host and our moderator today. Lexi's the leader of our One Voice Hispanic and our Latino employee resource group. And Lexi, all the work you've done has been amazing. And I'm so excited to get beyond my remarks so that everybody can hear from you the hard work that you've done. You guys have been planning great events for the whole month to come, and this is the first of those. So check out the Hispanic and Latino ERG Yammer page to learn everything that we've got going on this month. And we're super excited to have special guests on today's broadcast. Pedro Espinoza and Jorge Titinger are joining us today. Pedro's an entrepreneur in the technology space. He's an author, he's a speaker, and he focuses on diversity and inclusion. Jorge is the founder and CEO of Titinger Consulting. They help organizations align culture and strategies to produce best practices and best results. And they're both going to talk to us about how diversity and inclusion play a key role in businesses' success. They co-wrote this book, Differences That Make a Difference, Insights from 100 Leaders, including their thoughts on and sharing their thoughts on the importance of inclusion in corporate today. And you hear from those that you'd expect to hear from, like Google and Netflix. And what's so wonderful about this book, as I've been reading it, is that there's a lot of diverse leaders that you don't ordinarily get to hear from in the standard run-of-the-mill textbooks. It's the winner of the 2020 Latino Book Award for Current Affairs. I'm enjoying it, Jorge and Pedro, because it's funny and has a great sense of humor, and it's cheeky and witty. It's very readable. I love the diverse voices that you have in it throughout. But importantly, what struck me is it's really not just about diversity. It's about innovation, and it's about entrepreneurship, and it's really about the history of corporate America. So I'm reading it, and I'm thrilled that you're here to tell us more about it. And I hope that a bunch of us pick up copies of the book as well. This month, we are celebrating the independence of several countries: Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, Mexico, Chile, Belize. Congratulations. And what's so wonderful about celebrating this month, as well as the independence of those countries, is that America has and benefits from all of the multicultural customs and multi-ethnic values that all of our immigrants from South America bring to our country, and they are certainly a positive influence on our country, our neighborhoods, and our business. And so, for me and for Ryan Schneider and for Realogy, celebrating this month is a really important part of our core values at Realogy. You all know that we value community and integrity, innovation, leadership, and people. And more than anything, today is about our people, and our integrity. And I thought, before I hand it off to Tanya, who you all know so well, who leads talent for RBG and RFG, just to highlight a few of the benefits of having diversity and inclusion in the workplace. And I knew them, but I was also reminded of them because I read about them again in the book. But I really believe that when we have diverse points of view in the office and in our workplace and in our neighborhoods and in our school, we will have better perspectives and better experiences. We'll make better decisions because everybody comes to any particular issue or topic with different life experience, different skills, different values. And the same people who think the same way will never make as good a decision as a diverse group of employees or neighbors or congregants. I think that with diversity comes more creativity, comes more innovation, and certainly, absolutely, better decision making. And so I'm thrilled that we are able to start celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month today. We have an amazing program lined up. And Tanya, I know that you're going to speak a little bit more about our ERGs before we begin with the program. So welcome, Tanya.
Thank you, John. Hola, mi familia de Realogy. Hi, my Realogy family. Bienvenidos a todos. Welcome to everyone to this exciting kickoff for Hispanic Heritage Month. We have an awesome month planned for you, filled with education and networking to focus on increasing our overall cultural competence through One Voz, through our external diversity efforts, which is through our growth markets. And today, we hope to provide you with a glimpse into our Latino culture, offer leadership insights, and really provide you with a sneak peek on what you can expect throughout the month. And I think you're going to love it. To expand on the Realogy Diversity and Inclusion Council, which we launched when Realogy was formed years ago, in 2016, we created the Employee Resource Groups, the ERGs. So the ERGs really allow members to expand their network across the company, interact with employees and departments and leaders that they otherwise wouldn't have had the opportunity to do, and it's been amazing thus far. So let me just highlight a couple of the reasons why you might want to consider joining an ERG. Really offers career development opportunities. As members discuss career opportunities, they provide mentorship opportunities. There's a lot of discussion about the different leadership opportunities that are available across the company. And really, they've done a great job at leveraging the unique skill sets that each member brings to the ERG. While voluntary, members are encouraged to really lean in and participate in different events, awesome educational opportunities, leadership, providing you with the opportunity to grow your career. And I will say that since COVID, we've been through this crisis for the past 6 months. Wow, what an amazing job our ERGs have done bringing new members in, really becoming effective ERGs across not just one particular geography like Madison. We've connected employees across the entire country, in some cases across the globe and across all business units. It's been phenomenal. And most importantly, when we kicked off the ERGs in 2016, it takes some time to get off the ground. And I will say now that members play a critical role at really shaping the enterprise efforts from a diversity and inclusion standpoint, and are now influencing very critical business decisions in the areas of marketing and education, outreach, who we partner with from a charity standpoint. We've literally provided insights into marketing campaigns with our ERGs before launching them, and also focused on providing us with critical input on talent development. So I'm excited to help kick off Hispanic Heritage Month at Realogy with the One Voz Hispanic and Latino ERG. They have named this special month as Celebrate Our Cultura, which means celebrate our culture. I love this name as it underscores the importance of our culture within the Latino community. A few that come to mind as the epicenter for us are familia, family first always, food, we eat a lot of really good, spicy, tasty food, work ethic, and of course, music and dancing. And I will say, for those of you that participated in the Take Your Sons and Daughters to Work Day, we had our very own Lexi Lopez lead. I think it was a merengue session, so to teach our kids how to dance. So that was a lot of fun as well. We as Latinos are a fun bunch, and as John mentioned, there will be several fun and exciting events occurring during the month. So please be sure to follow the Hispanic and Latino ERG Yammer Group, page for all of the event details. I now have the absolute pleasure of introducing the One Voz leader. For those of you who know her, we know that her passion, her genuine compassion, her customer focus, her huge heart are only a few of her attributes. It's almost like, to know her is to love her. Lexi Lopez is an amazing human who has had a very difficult year personally, yet continues to amaze me and everyone around her with her energy, her focus, her perseverance. She has brought so much to One Voz, and as a result, the company and Realogy at large. She's recently been certified as a NARP 10 coach, and I want to personally thank her for her amazing contributions on behalf of all of the ERGs and Realogy at large. I will now turn it over to our fierce Latina leader of One Voz, Lexi Lopez, who will lead us through the balance of today's session.
Wepa. Thank you, Tanya, for that wonderful introduction. And John, thank you so much for sharing all of the information regarding Hispanic Heritage Month and showing your enthusiasm of our guests that are here with us today. I am honored to be the chair of the One Voice Hispanic and Latino ERG, and I am delighted to be able to officially kick off Hispanic Heritage Month with my Realogy familia. The One Voice ERG works hard, and we are orgullosos. We are proud to celebrate our cultura with all of you. Our culture and our heritage is built from many nations, and so we proudly stand and we say that we are unidos, we are united with our brothers and sisters from all the ERGs here at Realogy. That includes ACE, Asian, Pacific Islander, Women's, Real Pride, Real Disabilities, Service, Next Gen, Realogy Diversity and Inclusion Council, and Cardis Global Diversity and Inclusion Council. We have many events planned throughout Hispanic Heritage Month. So again, like Tanya and John said, please be sure to follow the Hispanic and Latino ERG Yammer page for all the details. But here they are at a glance. So September events are already on their way. We just had a movie chat about the Netflix original Mucho Mucho Amor, The Legend of Walter Mercado. Let me tell you, if you haven't seen it yet, I definitely recommend it. This man was very inspiring, full of love and peace, and watching this would just bring you smiles, which we absolutely need more of nowadays. So please join the One Voice Familia to celebrate the rest of the events that we have going on here in September. And of course, join us for the rest of the fun planned in October. October is also filled with some other events. We have some cooking lessons in there by two powerful Latina women here at Realogy. And we also have some other lunch events. So please feel free to bring your lunch and enjoy the activities. Okay, so I'm going to shift gears for a little bit here, and I want to move into a quick learning opportunity through a video. So I've had more and more people come and ask me, hey, Lexi, what's the difference between being a Latino, a Hispanic, and Spanish? Well, I have an educational but fun video to share, so hopefully it'll help clarify those terms and those words. So let's check out the video.
I'm gonna ask you, do you know what the difference between Latina or Hispanic and Spanish is?
Between Latina, Hispanic, and Spanish.
I'm gonna have to say where they live.
Okay, so like geographic.
Geographic.
I mean, they're just different ethnicities. I mean, between Mexican to Latin America to, European.
That was confusing. The general public and the media use both of these terms interchangeably, but there is a slight difference. Hispanic is a term that refers to Spanish-speaking origin or ancestry. Latino is a more frequently used term which refers to origin or ancestry to Latin America.
Does Latina mean someone who speaks Spanish? Because in the case of Brazilians who speak Portuguese.
Hispanic is basically based on whether you or your family speak the language of Spanish, whereas Latino is focusing more on geographic location, that being Latin America. So unlike Hispanic, Latino includes Brazilians but excludes Spaniards.
I hate when people call me Spanish because I'm not.
Okay.
You're Spanish because you're from Spain.
Spanish is from Spain, like
Yes!
conquistador, type thing. Europe.
I know a lot of people when they enter somewhere and they hear someone speak Spanish, like, oh, they're Spanish. And I'm like, no, they spoke Spanish to you. Yeah. That does not mean that they're from Spain.
For starters, Spanish describes someone who comes from Spain. It's a term of nationality, but it's also a language. Think of Italian. It's a language, but it's also a nationality. Which one is Latina? ¿Por qué no es Latina?
Por el semblante de la cara.
Semblante que tiene más African features.
No se ve Latina, no se ve hispana. Like she looks black.
Can you be black and be Latina?
I believe so, but some people of, Latin descent are like, no, we're different.
Those are the ones that have been colonized.
I'm not even gonna disagree with you there.
I think they all could be Latina. I feel like they could all be Hispanic. I mean, they all could be Spanish too. You don't know.
Yes! Perfect! You can't really tell just by a person's face whether they're Latino, Hispanic, or Spanish. Because many Latin American countries, like those of my parents, Colombia and Peru, were colonized by Spain, Many folks don't feel the need or want to identify with a term that indicates them belonging to Spain. Maybe think of it this way: Hispanic, a sense of community through a connection to Spain. Latino, a sense of community through a history of colonization from Spain. Colonization isn't something that we just read about in our textbooks. We feel the effects of centuries of colonization today through lost history, erasure of native and African languages, faith practices, basically our culture. So it's no wonder why so many folks just don't want to identify with the term Hispanic. That doesn't mean that Latino doesn't have any remnants of Spanish colonialism. I mean, Latino and Latina is supposed to describe folks from Latin America, but the term Latin America only came to be after European Spanish imperialism. It's important to remember that none of these forms of identity are perfect. And that's because they're socially constructed and mostly only used in the US. They also lead people to assume that Latino or Hispanic is a race, when that's not true. Which is why so many Latinos with African ancestry have begun to use the term Afro-Latina. As for me, well, until a term that comes around that fully encompasses and embraces both the indigenous and African influences of Latin America, I'm gonna stick to identifying as an indigenous Latina. How do you identify? How do you feel about the terms Latina, Hispanic, and Spanish? Let me know in the comments down below.
All right, thank you. I always love watching that video. It also makes me think too, how do I identify myself? Well, I identify myself as Latina, a Hispanic who speaks Spanish. So I encourage you, if you have Hispanic or Latino friends, ask them, get the time to get to know them and ask how they'd like to identify themselves. Okay, so now we've come to the really exciting and fun part of this special town hall. It is my pleasure to introduce to you these two distinguished Hispanic and Latino men, both from Peru. If you have any questions or comments throughout this conversation, please feel free to use the Q&A and we'll refer to them after our chat. So first up, we have Pedro David Espinoza, who is an entrepreneur, investor, board member, TED speaker, and author. In 2018, Pedro became the CEO of Alpaca Pan Peru, a venture that empowers women to become entrepreneurs. At the age of 24, Pedro co-wrote a book with Jorge Titinger, with contributions from Eric Schmidt, Reed Hastings, and Pat Gelsinger. His book received the 2020 Latino International Book Award Best Winner for Current Affairs. Educated at Stanford and Berkeley, Pedro began his career as a mechanic at Toyota. At the age of 15, Pedro composed and launched his singles on Apple, Spotify, and Amazon. He is also an investor in companies such as Nadine West, Kiwi Campus, and Feed.fm. He's been a speaker for the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the World Intellectual Property Organization. On top of that, he's also been profiled in Univision, Telemundo, Hispanic Shark Tank, Voice of America, and Forbes. And in 2019, he published that wonderful book that John introduced to you guys earlier, Differences That Make a Differences: How Organizations Succeed by Focusing on Innovation Through Inclusion. And he wrote that with Jorge Titinger. And they interviewed 175 global executives from Google, Netflix, Facebook, and many more. He also serves on the board of directors of Hertz Peru, Toyota Auto Espan, and Gesa. If you want to learn more about him, you can check his website out at pedroespinoza.com. And along with Pedro, we have our second guest, Jorge Titinger. He is a multi-award-winning CEO in the tech industry, and he is the founder and CEO of Titinger Consulting, a boutique consulting firm focused on strategy development, the cultural aspects of M&A, corporate transformations, and leadership coaching. He is also an award-winning co-author of the book Differences That Make a Difference, where he brings the thoughts and insights of over 100 top executives on the topic of inclusion and diversity and its impact on the success of companies. Mr. Titinger has over 30 years of experience in the high-tech industry and has held numerous executive positions in the semiconductor equipment and computer industries. He is a sought-after speaker and advisor, and his clients range from multi-billion-dollar companies to startups. Jorge was the chairman of the board of the Hispanic Foundation of Silicon Valley for 10 years, working to make lives of Hispanics better by focusing on education at all levels. He was born and raised in Peru and came to the USA to attend the university. He holds a Bachelor's of Science in Electrical Engineering, as well as a Master's in Electrical Engineering and a Master's in Engineering Management and Business, all from Stanford University. All right, so Jorge and Pedro, welcome to Realogy and welcome to this wonderful special town hall kicking off Hispanic Heritage Month. Thank you both for your time and participation. How are you guys doing today?
We're doing great. Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, Lexi,
Absolutely.
thanks for organizing this. It's a pleasure for us to be here.
Wonderful, wonderful. So let's get into this. You know, as I know John already introduced the book that you guys wrote. So I want to talk a little bit about it, not giving too much away from it, but we're going to start with some questions. You guys good with that?
Let's go.
Let's do it.
All right, perfect. All right, great. So Jorge and Pedro, you both had the opportunity to co-author this book, Differences That Make a Difference, in 2019, which, by the way, again, congratulations on winning that 2020 Latino International Book Award for current affairs. Can you guys share a little background on how you both met and then how you both came up with this idea for this book?
For sure. I can share the first part of the story and Jorge can share the second part. So in 2014, I was doing a summer program at Stanford and I co-founded a startup with some friends. And I decided to recruit a board of advisors and board of directors to help me with launching a technology company. So I had the honor of meeting Ron Gonzalez, who was the mayor of San Jose several years ago. And I approached him and I asked him to join the board and he happily joined. And so through our conversations and friendships with Ron and other Hispanic leaders in Silicon Valley, Ron decided to introduce Jorge and I through an email because Jorge was the chair of the Hispanic Foundation of Silicon Valley, where Ron is the CEO. And Jorge, you can continue the story.
Yeah. So I met Pedro through Ron, as he just explained, and but we actually formally met in person. I was a keynote speaker at an event called the Latino Leadership Summit that's organized every year around May. So after the event, Pedro approached me, introduced himself. We put a name and a face together, and we went to play golf. And I find golf is a great way to really get to know people. You see how they react, you see how they play, etc. We got along really great, and Pedro asked me if he could interview me for a book that he wanted to write, and I agreed. I think he was the second person he was going to interview for the book, and after the interview, he said, "Well, why don't we write the book together?" So really, the brainchild, this book is Pedro's brainchild. I was added on, and just as you can imagine, from the years of career in Silicon Valley and in the tech industry, I was able to contribute with a lot of the Rolodex that led us to as many interviews that we were able to make. And then we purposely wanted to highlight also the different views on this topic from a millennial and a baby boomer. Although I think Pedro goes too much into highlighting the difference in age that we have. I think it does it at least twice in the book, but that's okay.
Hey, it brings different perspectives. Well, I'm so happy to hear that. I love that story, and I loved how how important networking came into this key role and marrying you guys together. I mean, putting you guys together in this path to create something so wonderful. So in this book, you guys interviewed well over 100 people and relied on lots of research to write your book. What are some of the numbers that the data shows in favor of inclusive companies? And if I may add a little bit more to that, from this data and these companies that you interviewed, how much of a role did ERGs impact those numbers? Pedro, would you like to start?
Yeah, I would like to start with, we quoted in the beginning of the book the McKinsey study from 2015, and they did another study, more updated in 2018, where they did research over 300 companies from North America, Latin America, Asia, and Europe. And we saw huge numbers. We're not talking about 5% better financial performance by having gender diversity or ethnic diversity. We're talking about 30% better than the industry mean, right? So that's why Jorge and I, whenever we talk to our clients and customers, we're like, this is not only a social justice case, or it's not like the moral thing to do, but it's a business thing to do, right? It's 30%. It's a vast, vast number. And to give you another statistic, Lexi, is in 2018, 44% of the Fortune 500 companies were founded by immigrants and their children, right? So we can just see how much diversity, how much innovation diverse founders and entrepreneurs and immigrants are doing here in the US for the global economy. That's why we focus with Jorge a lot on the business case for inclusion, because it fosters innovation and entrepreneurship.
Yeah. Those are amazing numbers. Yeah, go ahead, Jorge.
Yeah, I was just going to say the study was actually over 3,000 companies, which is a much broader sample set. And the conclusions were that it impacts many aspects of the business, right? So talent acquisition, you don't have much more access if you are inclusive. Decision making, where you have more informed and more balanced decision making. You get a better, deeper insight into customers' needs, and then you have more engaged employees. And actually, this is not in the book because it's a later study by McKinsey. So they actually have redone their study in 2020. And what they show is that companies that have better than the average gender diversity in their senior ranks are outperforming those that are below the median by 25% in their actual profitability, and those that have both gender and ethnic diversity by 36%. So that every year, and partly is, we are making progress in this whole topic of diversity and inclusion. So there are more companies that are diverse and hopefully also inclusive, and if you want, we can talk about the difference of those two terms. But the numbers are really compelling, and so it isn't just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do.
I like the way that you phrase that. That is absolutely on point. It is a smart thing to do. So Pedro, I'm going to focus on you for a little bit. So as one reads through the book, there's an emphasis of inclusion over diversity. So every time that I've always participated in a conversation, it's always the other way around, diversity and inclusion. But through this book, we learned to see inclusion over diversity. Can you tell us a little bit more why inclusion is first?
Yeah, absolutely. So it reminds me of one of our interviews. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was Dan Schulman, PayPal CEO, who gave the quote about diversity is being invited to a party and inclusion is being asked to dance, right? So I think it's very critical and important to focus on inclusion because usually speaking, we already have diversity of thought because people come from different backgrounds and socioeconomic places. But it's more important to focus on inclusion so we can actually focus on leveling the playing field and making sure that everyone's voices are being heard, right? Like the name of your ERG, one voice, right? Una voz. So that's why Jorge and I really focus on inclusion, is because it goes beyond diversity, right? Because we don't want to focus too much on the token Latino, right? Or the token female in the board, or the token African American in the leadership team. I think some companies focus too much on that. We want to focus more on how do we engage with minorities and how do we make sure there is a culture of belonging at work.
That was perfectly explained. I love that. And I could connect that, with Realogy, with how we were able to kick off all of these wonderful ERGs, right? It's taking that action step where we can actually, bring our culture to everyone for further understanding. That's the doing, that's the action part of it. So that's wonderful. I love that. And Jorge, so through this book, it's mentioned that inclusion, needs to start at the top management. what are some steps, I guess, to bring it to middle management to kind of really make a real change?
Yeah, and so actually, it can start anywhere. I mean, in many cases, it's a grassroots movement. But our point is actually, if it does not get adopted and fully sponsored by the senior management to the point where it is really one of the critical things that the company is gonna be, is not put the jacket of inclusion. No, it's you gotta be inclusive. It has to be part of your culture. So where it begins is actually less important than where it actually ends up being sponsored and fully made one of the critical elements of the company. So, but you're right. The reality is, while it is critical that senior leadership believes in this and makes it a priority, as we all know, in many companies where the rubber hits the road is in middle management. And so there needs to be programs on training and mentorship, and nothing better than lead by example, and not only talk the talk but by walk the walk. And I'm a firm believer that anything that you want to accomplish better be measured. So one of the best ways to actually engage middle management and ensure that this is a priority is to set metrics for both diversity and inclusion. Clearly the diversity metrics are easier to come by, but there's ways to measure inclusion, and ensure that those are looked at on a regular basis. People show their trends on improvements, et cetera, et cetera. And like with anything, if it's going to have teeth, it needs to have consequences, right? And I want to highlight that many people, when I say the word consequence, they think of something negative. But no, I mean, consequences are just the result of a particular metric, and it could be very positive consequences in case things are achieved, and if they're not or not paid attention to, then yeah, they could be negative. But it doesn't need to start at the top, but it absolutely needs to be embraced and fully sponsored by the top. And through training and measurements, it's the way to actually have it be ingrained in the culture of the company, and not just a poster that people talk about.
No, those are great, valid points. I know here at Realogy, we have several learning opportunities of how exactly we can engage in these kind of goals. So I kind of want to talk a little bit more now on demographics. So I really liked how the book broke down the wants and the managerial styles of like each generation, right? So I know here at Realogy, we have many generations, right? And it's wonderful to see, even within like my own department, we have different generations, and the collaboration and the different perspectives that are shared makes our projects successful, right? So without giving too much away of everything that you have in your book, what can be the top 2 or 3 like takeaways that business owners or managers or decision makers should know about these evolving demographics that will be faced in the next few decades?
Great question, Lexi. I think the number one, and talking from a millennial generation, funny enough, millennials today, we are the largest segment of the labor force, right? And more purchasing power, our millennials are having more decision-making power. So companies have to prepare for the future of work. And I think COVID-19 has certainly accelerated this transition from flexibility, because now many companies, if not most, are working from home office or virtually on WebEx, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and all these other companies. So for demographics, I mean, we can see in California, for example, I think in very few years, 40% of the state will be Hispanic. It's just amazing how we're the fastest growing minority group in the United States, right? Yet alone today, we're nearly 20% of the US population is Latino, is Hispanic. So I think the number one thing that both of us, Jorge and I, were really surprised, and it has to do with demographics and Silicon Valley, it plays very dear to our heart, is why has Silicon Valley been so successful and innovative with so much entrepreneurship is because the Bay Area represents over 125, 130 nationalities, right? Something very, very hard to replicate. Of course, we have other tech hubs like Boston and New York and Israel and Singapore, but it's really hard to replicate that demographically speaking. So I think companies and organizations have to prepare to deal and to hire and retain millennials, right, and people of color, because we've seen many companies focus a lot on recruiting millennials, but unfortunately their retention rates are not doing that well, because as soon as they recruit them, they forget in how to retain them and make sure that they can bring their whole self to work, right? This culture of belonging. So I think it's important to focus on retention if you want to attract and retain millennials, right? Flexibility, working from home, and providing a lot of feedback. That's something really interesting we gained from our studies and research with the book, is the younger generations love to have mentors at work and love to receive feedback, insights, and advice. Even if that's on Slack or email or even a text message, we love that direct communication and feedback for sure.
Yeah,
Wonderful. And Jorge, would you like to add anything else?
Yeah, and one of the things that is really interesting is by 2030, 75% of the purchasing decisions, at least in the U.S., maybe sooner actually in other countries, are going to be made by millennials. And we all, and I don't know, it'd be interesting to ask, Realogy, if you guys have a young worker or young executive ERG. We've heard of actually a couple of companies that do, but most companies focus on ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, potentially even religion, etc. in their ERGs, and not so much in the age demographic. And Lexi, as you said in our book, we highlight the different work styles, the different leadership styles, the what they want by generation by generation. And today's workforce is mostly composed of baby boomers, Gen X, and millennials, right? And there are some Gen Zs getting into the workforce right now. But all three have very different, what motivates them is different, how to communicate with them is different. I have two millennial daughters that will not answer an email, will never pick up the phone, but if I send them a text, they respond right away. We need to adapt in companies on how we are actually marketing to that generation. How do we incorporate that generation into our workforces? And again, in an inclusive way, right? So not just say, well, I have a bunch of millennials, but do they have a voice? Do they participate in the conversations that matter for the company? And it'll be the same as Gen Z starts to get older and more of that generation starts to enter the workforce. So Pedro said, we think it's really important to include this notion of age demographic in your diversity as a company, and specifically with Latinos. There's a little over 60 million Latinos in the U.S., and 20% of those Latinos are under 18 years old. So is one of the youngest ethnic groups and growing, and it's growing to a really incredible pace at 13% per year, I think. So in the not too distant future, Latinos will potentially be up to 40% of the population. And, it's an enormous influence, an enormous power, and an enormous responsibility for that, for us Latinos to bring to the country.
No, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And yes, actually, to answer your question, we do have a next gen ERG that's led by Nicole Castillo. And let me tell you, ideas and programs that they have brought forth to the company have been phenomenal. So yes, it's wonderful to hear that. And I'm so happy to say and share that Realogy does have that. So that's wonderful. So thank you for sharing that. So I only have two more questions left for you guys. So the next one is, what would be the one surprising insight that you discovered throughout your interviews? Pedro, would you like to start?
Sure. I talked to Anita Sands, who wrote the introduction of her book. She's a board member, board director at Symantec and Pure Storage and other publicly traded companies. And she was telling me how to solve the board problem where we have a few women and people of color. So she gave me the example that we have to be a bit more flexible in our recruiting, because many times in boards, and I'm sure Jorge knows this better than anyone, they ask you, like, do you have board experience, right? Or have you been the CEO of a publicly traded company? So that question alone already discards a lot of women and minorities, right? It's sort of the mentality of you hire people from your country club, so then everyone's going to end up being like you, speaking your language, your culture, your zip code, and everything, right? So you don't have that inclusion, you don't have that diversity. So what Anita told me in the interview was being more flexible and adaptable in the recruiting strategy and going deeper. By going deeper, I mean she expressed the idea of looking at business units within these large multinational companies where you can find leaders that happen to be Hispanic, Asian American, African American women. So for example, she gave the example of AT&T Business. The CEO is Thaddeus Arroyo, who's Hispanic, right? So she gave many examples of how there are minority leaders in large Fortune 500 companies that have experience. However, they may not be the CEO of the entire company, but they have great experience in P&L management. So I thought that was a very cool insight, and it honestly opened my horizons in how to recruit board members and leadership team members as well.
Great.
Yeah.
And Jorge, what would you like to share?
Yeah, for me, actually, when we were thinking about writing the book, as we were talking to people, we added the first chapter. And the first chapter is the one where we were, like you mentioned earlier, Lexi, we distinguish diversity from inclusion, and we say it really is about inclusion. And that came out from talking to all these people. And there's many companies where they've moved from D and I to I and D in the way they talk about inclusion and diversity. And the best way to describe it is, diversity is, it's a reflection, it's a fact, right, of the mixture of differences that exist in a company or don't exist in a company. Right? You might have it or you might not. But inclusion is actually the full engagement of those diverse individuals sharing power at all levels in the organization and actually being able to bring, we've heard the phrase, their whole selves into work. So we saw too many companies that reported really great diversity numbers, but you start looking at how many of those diverse individuals are in the senior positions, what is the exit rate of diverse groups, and if they don't really embrace the whole concept of inclusion, you see that a lot of these people that come into companies end up leaving very quickly. They don't feel a sense of belonging. They don't, they're not, the opportunities to actually really be participating in the company don't open up if the company is not also inclusive. So one of the biggest ahas I think for both of us, to the point where we added a chapter and made it the first chapter, was that diversity is necessary because you need to have diversity to include it. But in the end, really the more powerful thing to do is be inclusive.
All right. Thank you so much, both of you, for sharing your insights on that. And I love learning what you guys learned throughout this whole project, right? That's the whole point about, collaborating and working together. And again, both of you, with your different perspectives and different knowledge, were able to execute such a wonderful book. So thank you. So before I let you guys go, I do want to ask you guys, out of all the hundreds quotes that you guys collected throughout this book, what would be your favorite ones? Maybe one or two of them. Jorge, I'll start with you.
Pedro quoted Anita Sands already in his insight, and there's a reason why we asked her to actually write the introduction to the book. She's brilliant. So one of my favorite quotes is when she talks about why we made the distinction between inclusion and diversity and put inclusion first. She said, I agree with her logic and have always seen diversity as a fact, whereas inclusion is an active choice. Put another way, you can think of diversity as the seeds, inclusion as the crop, and belonging as the way in which you harvest both. I love that quote.
Yeah, so for me, it comes, and I have the book right here. It comes on the part where a good friend of mine, he's an entrepreneur. His name is Rodrigo Garza from Mexico. And he says, I am Mexican, but I look white. I am automatically judged by my name, yet I am treated differently when someone looks at me. So this reminds me of the video, Lexi, that you shared where, yeah, people from Latin America, there's so many races. Like even looking at our country of Peru, right, with Jorge, like people from the mountains look different than people from the Amazon rainforest and people from the ocean side. So it's the beauty and the diversity and the richness of our countries where we have that diversity within ourselves.
Beautiful quote. I really love that. And yes, you're absolutely right. We come in all colors, all shapes, all sizes. You know, there is no one unique look for being a Hispanic or Latino. So thank you. So we're coming at the end of our fireside chat. I truly appreciate both of you for spending the time here today at Realogy to help kick off Hispanic Heritage Month. I look forward to continuing to read your book and learning more. So for those of you at the event, you know, I'm excited to share that the One Voice ERG has obtained a few copies of this book, but you got to wait till the end of this town hall to share how you guys can obtain it. But Pedro, Jorge, muchas gracias, muchas bendiciones. May you continue to be successful. Thank you so much for your time.
Gracias.
Thank you. And it's companies like yours that inspire us. So this is wonderful. I hope you continue to be really successful on your journey. Thanks a lot, everybody. Take care.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
John. Thank you, Tanya. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Okay, so now it is my pleasure to introduce our next guest, who is the Director of Global Development and Growth Markets here at Realogy, and he was recently named the lead of our Realogy Diversity and Inclusion Council. You may be asking yourself, well, what is growth markets and what role does Realogy play and have in this? So please welcome my friend and my colleague, Jason Rivero. Bienvenido, Jason.
Lexi, thank you so much. So, you know, I really got to hand it to you. You've executed this flawlessly. You do everything that you do it exceptional. So we're so fortunate to have you as a leader. And thank you to Tanya and to John for their continued support and always driving this conversation, being there when we need them in these important conversations. And of course, Jorge, thank you for sharing your book, and Pedro for that insight. And it's actually a perfect segue as we talk about, you know, what are we doing on the business side of the house? We're doing a lot, I think, internally as well. And I want to share with you some things that maybe you might not be aware of. And of course, I got to show my part of my culture. Culture is you know, the food that we talked about, dancing, the language, and also soccer. So that's a big one. So hopefully there are other Real Madrid fans here watching right now. So if we could go to our first slide here, we talk about what are Realogy growth markets. So really, this is a business initiative focused on making sure that we diversify our broker, owner, and agent representations across the brand portfolio. And this is important, just as we mentioned here, as Jorge and Pedro talked about, in terms of having those metrics. We know that we want to reflect the communities we serve. And then it's not only good for us to do this, but it's also good for our business. Because if we reflect the communities we serve, we're going to be better equipped, more competitive in all ways. Next slide, please. So the data is a big driver. I'm just going to highlight some 3 key indicators, but some things that perhaps if you're not constantly looking at these numbers, they might not stand out. So if you look at it from a high level, I think you say, okay, well, Hispanics are a growing population. We know that in a lot of cities, they are actually a majority of the population, some parts around the country as well. But overall, it's 18.3% of the country. However, in some key economic drivers that we have to look at, because we're in the business of real estate and the economy, is we see that 51.6% of the overall U.S. home ownership growth. So think about that. 18% of the population is driving 51.6% of the new home ownership growth in this country. That is a huge number, and we see that because of household formations at a higher rate. We also know that the Hispanic labor force is very high. So as we see a 66.8 Hispanic labor force, it's the highest of all demographics. Over the past 2 decades, Hispanics have been a key driver in terms of labor force participation. So this is a demographic that you and your brand should be focused on and dedicated on messaging, on training your agents, and on making sure that your marketing is relevant to those segments. Next. So how do we really go to market with this? We do have a strategy. There's a lot of things that we want to highlight, but just from the brief time that we have here with you, I want to make sure that we understand the 4 buckets that we evaluate this through. So we have events, marketing, education, and talent, which there are several programs in each one of these areas that we have and are available. Next, please. So our industry partnerships, this is typically what you're most familiar with. It's what you see with us out in the marketplace. Realogy is the leader, the undoubtable leader in this, helping make sure that we are founding members of all the major organizations that are out there. So one example is, of course, the National Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals. We as an organization have been there since the very founding. We are also the highest level sponsor of this organization. No other residential brand can claim the same. And we engage with them not only in the national events, but in a lot of the local chapters. This is really where it comes to life. This is really where we make the connection in terms of educating our agents, educating our brokers, and then also finding the talent that can work not only for our own company, but also in the local offices for your affiliates and brokerages. We are leading the way in the NAREP Top 250. If you look at the numbers year after year, we're consistent of that. And this is an effort that I work with many of you, some of our brand communicators as well, to drive those numbers. We want great engagement of that. And actually coming up, I want to make sure that everyone that's on this video and on this session can take advantage of an event that's happening next week. So NAREP has their annual sales event, sales mastery event that they're hosting. We have Mike Meadler, CEO and president of Century 21. He's going to host a great session with Tom and Mike Ferry. And we also have on the Latitude side of a house, which is a new event that we've also are the only residential real estate company to be a sponsor of this event, which is kind of like a South by Southwest, but focusing on the power of the new mainstream economy, meaning the Hispanic community and how they're driving these numbers. And our own Ryan Schneider will be speaking at this event. And so I want to invite you to use this code that I have here on this slide. So I have registrations for you to attend. It's a tremendous lineup. You have to look at it. So please make sure and participate. Next slide. We've also created a lot of agent engagement events throughout the country, specifically on our company-owned side of the house and Coldwell Banker. We're starting to branch out into the other brands as well. And this month, we have several of these events being hosted throughout Hispanic Heritage Month in these local markets. We're also launching local councils, business resource groups in these markets to engage our agents, to engage our employees, to have these conversations, to have these events, and to have their own metrics that they're measuring and focused on. Next. And this has all worked out. We have our diversity franchise program, which many of you have heard about for many years. And actually this year, we've revamped that. Coldwell Banker has taken it to the next level by offering some specific financial benefits and then also some mentorship components to that. And we've created our own event called Friends of Realogy to help bring in a pipeline, a funnel of new and diverse prospects to come into our organization to see the breadth and of our brands and the offering that we have as an organization. And I want to make a call out to a new employee that we have. So on the right-hand side, you have Albert Yabor. He actually sold his brokerage to a Century 21 affiliate, and he is now We're so thankful to join him as of the past couple of weeks, a branch manager down in Naples, Florida with Coldwell Banker. So as a result of programs like this is how we're helping drive that change in a very notable way. Last one. I encourage you, many of you, these are some numbers. We want to be fully transparent. As you know, we've been driving the conversation of fair housing. Bonnie Sue and her team created a fabulous course on delivering the promise of fair housing. We're measuring these things, and we're encouraging you as brand leaders to make sure that you're driving not only for your agents to sign the pledge, but to also take the course. So thank you to all of you on the brand side and then also on the Realogy level that have taken and signed the pledge. Please continue to drive these efforts. And finally, in closing, on my next slide, I want to invite you, we're going to close the month out, everything that we've done, we're going to celebrate at the end of Hispanic Heritage Month, October 15th, with a special fireside chat between Ryan Schneider and Gary Acosta, co-founder and CEO of NAREP. And we're going to have some special videos for you to be able to view during that time. Lexi, thank you again for this time. Thank you, everybody, and enjoy the rest of Hispanic Heritage Month. Back to you.
All right. Thank you, Jason. I mean, I love that you're leading all of these efforts, and I love the collaboration between all the brands to make this successful. So thank you for being a great leader in this area. But before I let you go, I'm going to kick it back to you for one more thing. Audience wants to know, where can they get your jersey?
That's a good question. This is a one and only edition right here, Rivero. So, you'll have to... I won't let you get this one here, but I can put it here in the chat.
Sounds great, Jason. All right. Thank you, Jason. Okay, so before we wrap up, I do want to share some upcoming events that are still occurring here at Realogy and kind of give you a fresh reminder. So the first thing, this afternoon, the Real Pride ERG is kicking off their summer tea party. So you guys have to go over to the Real Pride Yammer page, check out the event details there, but it starts today at 4 o'clock. There's going to be DJing, there's going to be music. I mean, what a great way to end the summer of whatever we had of summer, right? But to kick off the weekend. So thank you to the Real Pride ERG for coordinating this event. Also, a friendly reminder, One Voice is going to have their next exciting event next week on Wednesday, September 23rd. We're going to be having a lunch chat with two powerful, inspirational leaders at Realogy. We have Don Casey, President and CEO of Realogy Title Group, and he is also the executive sponsor of One Voice. And we have Mike Meadler, President and CEO of Century 21 Real Estate LLC. We're going to be having a fireside chat on the NAREP 10 discipline. So don't miss that. Grab some lunch and join us. And then lastly, and most importantly, our Real Disabilities ERG will be hosting a special town hall next week that Ryan had mentioned at this town hall that we had this week in regards to, suicide awareness and mental health. So there's going to be a health professional that's going to be leading the conversation. You definitely don't want to miss it. That's September 23rd at 1:30. You can visit their Yammer page, Real Disabilities, to get all the event details on that. Okay, and then lastly, as I had mentioned, the book that we talked about today, Differences That Make a Difference. We have a few copies. There are limited amounts, but if you would like a free copy, all you need to do is go visit the Hispanic and Latino ERG Yammer page. There is a pinned post there that has instructions. You simply click the link that's on there. It's going to redirect you to the Realogy Home Network for Parents and Caregivers site, and then you'll find the book order form there. So before we end this, and I know we're at time, a huge thank you to those who participated in this town hall. I'm also grateful for all the behind the scenes team who kept this event moving. A big shout out to Joe, to John Lovetier, to Kathleen and Danielle. Thank you so much for your help in making this town hall successful. Again, have a great weekend, have a great fin de semana, and happy Hispanic Heritage Month. Thank you, guys.